The sun was lowering over Red Creek, spilling orange light across the dusty street and the wooden storefronts. Horses snorted at the hitching posts, and the saloon piano played something slow and half-drunk inside. Naomi Carter stepped out of the general store, holding a small cloth bag of supplies. She moved with natural grace despite the curious eyes that followed her everywhere in town. Her deep brown dress hugged her curves, and the breeze lifted the edge of her dark curls rested on her shoulders. Red Creek wasn't used to women like Naomi. Not women who carried themselves like queens. Not women who didn't shrink under stares. A rider thundered into town. Hooves pounded the dirt so hard the ground seemed to shake. Heads turned. The horse slowed only when it reached the center of town. The rider swung down with effortless strength. Boone Walker. Everyone knew that name. 6'5" of muscle and sunburned grit. A bounty hunter with a reputation for bringing outlaws back breathing or not at all. His hat shadowed sharp gray eyes that scanned the street with quiet authority. Naomi didn't look away. Most people did. But she met his gaze. Something unspoken passed between them. Boone frowned slightly, as if surprised. Then the moment ended. A commotion exploded behind him. "Stop him!" A man burst from the saloon doors, clutching a stolen purse. Naomi had barely time to react before the thief slammed into her. The impact knocked the bag from her hands. She stumbled, but strong arms caught her. Boone's. One hand gripped her waist, the other steadied her shoulder. The thief ran past them. Boone didn't even look. His attention had locked onto Naomi. She realized suddenly how close they were. His palm was warm, firm, too firm. She could feel his breath, slow, steady, her own breath caught. "You all right?" Boone asked quietly. His voice was deep enough to rumble through her ribs. Naomi cleared her throat. "If I would be," she said, lifting her chin slightly, "if Cowboy stopped grabbing me." Boone blinked. Then he slowly removed his hand, but his eyes lingered. "You always this stubborn?" "Only with strangers who hold on too long." The thief suddenly screamed somewhere behind him. Boone turned his head slightly, without looking, without moving his feet. He flicked the knife from his belt. The blade spun through the air. Thunk! The thief howled as the knife pinned his sleeve to a wooden post. The entire street went silent. Boone casually walked over, yanked the purse from the stunned thief, and retrieved his knife. He returned to Naomi and handed her the purse. It wasn't hers, but she understood the gesture. "You catch trouble often?" Naomi shrugged. "Trouble usually finds me." He studied her more carefully now. "You new in Red Creek?" Naomi nodded. "Just passing through." Something about that answer seemed to bother him. "People don't usually pass through here," Boone said. "Maybe I'm unusual." A smile tugged at his mouth. "Yeah," he said quietly, "you are." Their eyes met again, longer this time. The air between them felt suddenly heavier, charged. Naomi turned away first, bending to pick up her fallen supplies. Boone crouched to help. Their hands brushed, electric. She felt it. Judging by his sharp inhale, he felt it too. They both froze, then slowly stood. "Careful around here," Boone said. "That a warning?" "Advice." Naomi slung the bag over her shoulder. "Thanks for catching me," she said. Boone tipped his hat. "Any time." She started walking down the street. Boone watched her go, the sway of her hips, the confidence in her stride. Something inside him stirred, something dangerous, something he hadn't felt in years. Across the street, the bartender leaned out of the saloon. "You gonna stare all day, Walker?" Boone didn't answer. He was still watching Naomi disappear down the road, and he had the strange feeling that the moment he grabbed her waist, something in his life had changed forever. The sky over the plains turned black long before night arrived.
A wall of storm clouds rolled across the horizon like a charging army, swallowing the sunset and dragging thunder behind it. Naomi Carter urged her horse forward, her fingers tightening on the reins. "Just a little farther," she whispered. Wind whipped through the tall grass, tugging at her dress and tossing her curls wildly around her face. The first drops of rain struck the ground with heavy thuds, darkening the dust beneath her horse's hooves. She had underestimated the distance between towns, and now the storm was closing in fast. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the empty prairie for a split second. Then darkness swallowed everything again. The horse snorted nervously. "Easy," Naomi murmured, leaning forward to stroke its neck. But the wind howled louder. Rain began falling in thick sheets. Within minutes, Naomi was soaked to the bone. Her horse slowed, struggling against the mud forming beneath its hooves. Naomi scanned the darkness desperately. Then, a light, faint but real. A lantern glow flickered in the distance. Relief rushed through her chest. She guided the horse toward it. As she drew closer, the shape of a ranch house appeared through the rain. A barn stood beside it, sturdy and weathered, its wooden doors rattling in the storm. Naomi slid from the saddle, her boots sinking into the mud. She tied the horse beneath the barn overhang before hurrying toward the house. Rain dripped from her hair and down her back as she raised her hand and knocked. The door swung open almost instantly. Boone Walker stood in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain poured down behind Naomi like a curtain. Boone's gray eyes widened slightly beneath the shadow of his hat. "Well," Naomi said softly, breathless from the cold, "of all the ranches in the West." Boone leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "You plannin' on standin' in the rain all night?" She tilted her head. "Is that an invitation?" "It's a storm." A flash of lightning lit the sky behind her. Boone stepped aside immediately. "Get inside." Naomi didn't argue. Warm air wrapped around her the moment she stepped across the threshold. The ranch house smelled like cedar wood, leather, and coffee. Boone shut the door behind her, cutting off the roar of wind outside. Water dripped from Naomi's dress on the wooden floor. Boone grabbed a thick towel from a nearby chair and handed it to her. "You'll freeze like that." Naomi accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you." She began drying her hair slowly, squeezing rainwater from the curls resting against her neck. Boone tried, very unsuccessfully, not to stare. Her dress clung to her body after the rain, outlining every curve with startling clarity. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "You're staring again, Cowboy." Boone cleared his throat. "Just making sure you're not turning into an icicle." "Is that so?" Boone walked toward the stove and poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot warming there. "Storm like this won't pass until morning." He handed her a mug. Naomi wrapped her fingers around it, welcoming the warmth. They stood quietly for a moment while thunder rolled across the plains. "You live out here alone?" Naomi asked. Boone nodded. "Peaceful most days." Naomi glanced toward the window where rain battered the glass. "Tonight doesn't seem peaceful." "Storms come and go." His eyes drifted back to her. "Strangers riding up in the middle of them are rarer." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "You saying I'm trouble?" Boone shrugged. "Not sure yet." She walked toward the fireplace and held her hands toward the flames. The firelight cast a golden glow across her skin. Boone leaned against the kitchen table, watching her. "You never told me why you're traveling alone," he said quietly. Naomi kept her eyes on the fire. "Does a woman need a reason?" "Out here?" Boone shrugged slowly. "Yeah, usually." She turned slightly. "And what reason would satisfy you?" "The honest one." Their eyes met. For a moment, Naomi looked like she might answer. Instead, She set the coffee mug down. "I should leave before I overstay my welcome." She stepped toward the door. Boone pushed himself off the table. "The storm's getting worse. I've ridden through worse." Her hand reached for the door handle. Boone moved instinctively. His hand closed around her waist. Naomi froze, the same way she had in town days earlier, but this time his grip lingered, stronger, warmer. He gently pulled her back from the door, close enough that the heat from his body reached her through the damp fabric. Naomi's breath caught. "Boone," she said quietly. His voice dropped low. "You always run this fast?" "I'm not running." "Feels like it." Their eyes locked. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the shutters, but inside the house, the air between them grew strangely still. Naomi could feel his breath against her cheek, slow, steady. Her heart pounded in response. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Boone's hand remained at her waist. "I know enough." "Oh? You ride alone through a storm instead of asking for help." His gaze softened slightly. "That tells me something." Naomi tilted her head. "And what's that?" "That you're either brave," his thumb shifted slightly against the small of her back, "or running from something that scares you more than the storm." For the first time since arriving, Naomi looked uncertain, just for a second. Then she stepped back. Boone let his hand fall away. She crossed her arms, suddenly aware of the way his shirt clung to her damp skin. "Got any dry clothes?" she asked. Boone blinked, pulled from the moment. "Yeah," he cleared his throat. "I'll grab something." As he walked toward the bedroom hallway, he ran his hair through his hair. The storm outside wasn't the only thing shaking the house tonight, and Boone Walker had the uneasy feeling that letting Naomi Carter walk through his door might change his quiet life forever.
The storm refused to move on. Rain continued to hammer the roof of Boone Walker's ranch house, the steady rhythm echoing through the quiet rooms like distant drums. Wind pressed against the windows, rattling the wooden frames every few minutes. Inside, the fire crackled warmly in the stone fireplace. Boone stood near the stove, staring into his coffee cup. He had faced gunfights, outlaws, and wild stampedes without hesitation. Yet somehow the woman in the next room made him feel more unsettled than any of them. The bedroom door creaked open. Boone looked up. Naomi stepped into the room wearing one of his shirts. It hung loosely over her shoulders, the sleeves rolled up past her wrists. The dark fabric fell just past her hips, barely hiding the curves beneath it. For a moment, Boone forgot how to breathe. Naomi noticed immediately. Her lips curved slightly. "You're staring again." Boone blinked, snapping himself out of the moment. "I'm just surprised it fits." She raised an eyebrow. "It doesn't." She gestured down at the oversized shirt. "I look like I borrowed it from a giant." Boone rubbed the back of his neck, trying not to smile. "That'd be accurate." Naomi walked closer to the fire, stretching her hands towards the warmth. The golden light flickered across her skin, dancing along her cheekbones and catching in her dark curls. Boone leaned his shoulder against the wall, watching her. "You comfortable?" he asked. "More than outside in that storm." Thunder rumbled across the plains, shaking the windows again. Naomi glanced toward the sound. "You get storms like this often?" "Couple times a year." "And you just sit here alone, listening to them?" Boone shrugged. "Storms don't bother me." Naomi turned slowly. "Loneliness doesn't either?" The question hung in the air. Boone didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire for a long moment before speaking. "You always ask questions like that?" "Only when the silence gets too loud." Boone sighed softly. "This place used to be louder." Naomi waited. "My wife liked storms," he said quietly. "Said they made the world feel alive." Naomi's expression softened. "What happened?" Boone's jaw tightened slightly. "Fever,
5 winters ago. The fire popped loudly in the silence that followed. "I'm sorry," Naomi said gently. Boone nodded once. "After that, I figured it was easier to keep the world at a distance." Naomi studied him. "And that's been working for you?" "Most days." Her lips curved faintly. "Tonight doesn't seem like most days." Boone looked up at her. "You always this honest?" "Only when people deserve it." That answer surprised him. The storm outside rumbled again, but neither of them looked away from each other this time. Something in the air shifted. Naomi walked closer to the table where Boone stood. The distance between them shrank to only a few feet. "You know, Boone, most men in town wouldn't let a stranger stay the night." Boone folded his arms. "Most men in town aren't worried about you stealing their horses." Naomi laughed softly. "Maybe I should. You'd have to outrun me first." She tilted her head slightly. "And could I?" Boone took one slow step toward her. "You can try." Now they stood only inches apart. Naomi felt the warmth of his presence immediately. He was taller up close, broader. His shadow fell on her like a quiet shelter. Her heartbeat quickened. Boone noticed. "You all right?" he asked softly. "Just realizing something." "What's that?" "You're even bigger up close." He chuckled quietly. "And you're even more stubborn." Naomi crossed her arms playfully. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Her eyes sparkled. "You grabbed my waist twice now, Boone Walker. That doesn't exactly scream respecting distance." Boone's expression shifted slightly. "Is that bothering you?" Naomi hesitated. "No." The honesty of her answer surprised them both. Boone took another step closer. Now their boots almost touched. "You should probably keep some distance," Naomi murmured. "Why?" "Because I'm leaving tomorrow." Boone's gaze darkened slightly. "You say that like it's already decided." "It is." "You always run before something good starts?" Naomi looked away. Boone gently reached out. His fingers brushed her chin, guiding her face back toward him. "Look at me." She did. His voice softened. "You don't have to keep running." Naomi swallowed. "You don't know that." Boone studied her face carefully, the uncertainty in her eyes, the strength hiding behind it. Without thinking, his hand drifted down to her waist again. This time, Naomi didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that her breath brushed his collar. "Boone," she whispered. He barely heard the word over his own heartbeat. "You should stop," she said quietly, but she didn't move. Boone's other hand rose slowly, brushing a curl away from her cheek. His fingers lingered against her skin. "You want me to?" he asked softly. Naomi hesitated. The storm thundered outside, wind shaking the shutters violently. But inside the room, everything felt impossibly still. She looked into his eyes and shook her head once. That was all the permission Boone needed. He pulled her gently against him. The space between them vanished. Naomi's hands gripped the front of his shirt instinctively as he lowered his head. Their lips met slowly, carefully. The kiss wasn't rushed. It was curious, testing. But when Naomi melted into him, Boone's arms tightened around her waist. The warmth between them deepened. Outside, lightning lit the sky. Inside, the fire glowed brighter. When they finally pulled apart, Naomi rested her forehead against his chest, breathing softly. Boone looked down at her with quiet disbelief. "You're trouble," he murmured. Naomi smiled against him. "Storms usually are."
Morning arrived quietly at Walker Ranch. The storm that had raged through the night had moved east, leaving the prairie washed clean. Sunlight spilled across the endless grasslands, turning the drops of rain on every blade into glittering sparks. Inside the ranch house, the fire had burned low. Boone woke slowly. For a moment, he simply stared at the ceiling, listening to the peaceful silence that had replaced the storm. Then he remembered. Naomi. He sat up. The blanket beside him was empty.
A sudden uneasiness settled in his chest as he pulled on his shirt and walked outside. The morning air smelled fresh and cool. Naomi stood on the porch railing, looking out over the wide-open prairie. Her dark curls moved gently in the breeze, and she wore the same oversized shirt he had given her the night before. Boone leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You planning to leave without saying goodbye?" he asked. Naomi didn't turn right away. "I thought about it." Boone crossed the porch slowly until he stood beside her. "Well?" She sighed softly. "I'm still thinking." Boone rested his forearms on the railing. The land stretched endlessly in every direction. "You could stay," he said simply. Naomi gave a quiet laugh. "You make it sound easy." "Sometimes it is." She shook her head. "No, it isn't." The smile faded from Boone's face. "You want to tell me what's chasing you?" Naomi stared out across the plains for a long moment. Then she spoke. "My father owns land south of here." Boone nodded slowly. "Big ranch?" "Big ego." That made him smirk. "What'd you do to make a man like that send you running across the West?" Naomi folded her arms against the morning chill. "I was promised to a man I didn't love." Boone's jaw tightened. "Arranged marriage?" "Yes." She turned toward him now, her expression serious. "The man is twice my age. My father sees it as a business deal." Boone felt anger rise quietly in his chest. "And you ran," Naomi said. "I left in the middle of the night. I figured if I could get far enough away, maybe he'd give up." Boone studied her face carefully. "But he didn't." She shook her head slowly. "He sent men after me." Boone straightened. "How many?" "I don't know." That answer alone told him enough. His eyes drifted toward the open prairie. "How long ago?" 2 weeks. Boone nodded slowly. "That means they're close." Naomi watched him carefully. "You don't sound surprised." "I've tracked people across half this territory," Boone replied. "Men chasing money don't quit easily." Naomi looked down at the porch boards. "That's why I need to leave." Boone sharpened toward her. "You're not going anywhere." Her head lifted. "You don't get to decide that." "No," he admitted, "but I do get to decide who rides onto my land." Naomi's eyes softened slightly. "You can't fight them all." Boone shrugged. "Maybe not." His voice grew quieter. "But I can fight enough of them." She stared at him for a long moment. "Why would you do that for me?" Boone met her gaze steadily. "You really need to ask?" The answer hung in the air between them. Naomi looked away first. "Boone, we barely know each other." "Doesn't feel that way." Her heart thumped hard at those words. She stepped away from the railing. "I didn't come here to ruin your life." Boone followed her. "You didn't." She shook her head. "You have a peaceful ranch, a quiet life. Men chasing me will bring trouble." Boone gave a short laugh. "Naomi, trouble has been following me for 20 years. She stopped walking. "So that's your answer?" "That's my decision." Naomi crossed her arms stubbornly. "You don't even know if I want your protection." Boone took 2 long steps forward. Before Naomi could react, his hand slipped around her waist. The familiar warmth of his grip sent a spark through her chest. He pulled her gently closer, close enough that she could feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "You're terrible at pretending you don't," he said softly. Naomi's breath caught. "You're very sure of yourself." "Not always." His thumb moved slightly against the small of her back. "But when it comes to this, I am." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "To what?" "To the fact that you don't really want to leave." Naomi searched his eyes. Part of her wanted to deny it. Another part knew he was right. She had spent 2 weeks running, 2 weeks sleeping in strange places, always looking over her shoulder. Last night had been the first time she felt safe, the first time she felt seen. Her voice trembled slightly. "If they come here, someone could get hurt." Boone's eyes hardened. "They won't touch you." "You can't promise that." "I can promise I'll try." Silence settled between them again. Naomi looked down at his hand, still resting at her waist. "You know," she murmured, "this is the third time you've grabbed me like that." Boone smirked faintly. "You keeping count?" "Maybe." He leaned slightly closer. "And you still haven't told me to stop." Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Maybe I'm deciding." Boone's voice softened. "Well, decide fast." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Boone glanced toward the distant hills. 3 tiny figures appeared on the horizon. Riders, approaching fast. Boone's expression turned serious. "Because I think your father's men just found you."
The riders grew clearer as they approached. 3 figures on horseback cut across the prairie, their coats dark against the bright morning sky. Dust trailed behind them as their horses pushed hard toward Walker Ranch. Naomi saw them the same moment Boone did. Her stomach dropped. "She found me," she whispered. Boone didn't take his eyes off the horizon. "Looks like it." Naomi stepped away from him, anxiety tightening her chest. "This is exactly what I didn't want." Boone turned calmly and walked back inside the house. Naomi blinked. "What are you doing?" Boone returned a moment later with his rifle resting across his shoulder. "Getting ready." Her eyes widened. "Boone, no!" He walked past her toward the edge of the porch. "They're not taking you." "They're not here to negotiate," Naomi said quickly. "Neither am I." Boone stepped down from the porch and into the dirt yard. His boots crunched against the gravel as he moved with slow, deliberate confidence. Naomi followed him halfway down the steps. "You can't fight 3 armed men alone." Boone glanced over his shoulder. His voice was calm. "I've fought worse." The riders finally reached the wooden gate at the edge of the ranch property. Their horses slowed as they approached the house, clearly surprised to see Boone Walker standing in the open yard waiting for them. The leader of the group pulled his horse to a stop. He was a thin man with a sharp face and expensive riding gear. His eyes flicked between Boone and the ranch house behind him. "Well now," the man said with a sneer, "looks like we found our runaway." Boone rested the rifle against his shoulder casually. "You found the wrong ranch." The rider laughed. "Not according to the tracks." His gaze shifted toward Naomi standing on the porch. "There she is." Naomi felt Boone stiffen slightly. The man continued smugly. "That woman belongs to Thomas Carter, and we're here to bring her back." Boone's voice turned cold. "She doesn't belong to anyone." One of the other riders chuckled. "You Boone Walker?" Boone didn't answer. "That's him," the leader said. "Heard about you. Bounty hunter. Likes to play hero." Boone tilted his head slightly. "I don't play." The leader leaned forward in his saddle. "This doesn't concern you, Walker. Step aside and we'll take the girl peacefully." Boone didn't move. The wind swept across the prairie, rustling the tall grass around them. Naomi's heart pounded as she watched the standoff. "Last warning," the rider said. Boone slowly lowered the rifle from his shoulder. For a second, Naomi thought he might step aside. Instead, he planted the butt of the rifle firmly in the dirt. "You ride onto my land and threaten someone under my roof," Boone said quietly. His gray eyes hardened. "That makes it my business." The riders exchanged glances. The leader sighed dramatically. "Well, I was hoping this would be easier." He nodded to the men beside him. Everything happened fast. One rider reached for his gun. Boone moved first. His rifle cracked like thunder. The bullet struck the ground directly in front of the horse, sending the animal rearing backward violently. The rider cursed and struggled to control it. Boone stepped forward, his presence suddenly overwhelming.
"You draw another weapon," he said calmly, "and the next shot won't miss." The yard fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. The leader stared at Boone for several long seconds. Then he laughed softly. "You're willing to die for a woman you barely know?" Boone didn't hesitate. "Yes." Naomi felt something twist inside her chest. The rider looked past Boone toward the porch. "You hear that, miss? Man's about to get himself killed for you." Naomi slowly stepped down from the porch. Boone glanced back at her. "I told you to stay inside." "I'm not hiding anymore," she said firmly. She walked across the yard until she stood beside him. The riders watched the two of them with growing irritation. Naomi lifted her chin. "I'm not going back," she said clearly. The leader's faded. "You don't have a choice." Boone's hand found Naomi's waist once more, not pulling her away, just steadying her. A quiet, protective gesture. "She does," Boone said, "and she already made it." The rider's jaw tightened. For a tense moment, it looked like the fight might begin again. Then the leader exhaled sharply and shook his head. "This isn't worth dying over." He tugged his horse's reins. "But your father won't forget this." Naomi met his gaze without fear. "Tell him I won't either." The riders turned their horses and rode off across the prairie. The dust slowly settled behind them. Silence returned to the ranch. Naomi let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Boone leaned his rifle against the porch railing. "You all right?" She turned toward him. "You're insane." Boone smiled faintly. "Been called worse." Naomi stepped closer. "You could have been killed." "Maybe." His eyes softened. "But you would have been gone." She searched his face carefully. "Why didn't you let them take me?" Boone didn't look away. "Because you didn't want to go." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And if I stay?" Boone's hand slipped around her waist once more, this time pulling her gently against him, close enough that she could feel every steady breath leaving his chest. "Then stay," he said softly. Naomi looked up at him. For the first time since she had run away from home, she felt certain she wasn't running anymore. Her answer came without hesitation. "I will." Boone smiled. Then he kissed her, slow, deep, and full of promise, beneath the wide open sky of the Wild West.